middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem? If I'm smart enough to have multiple options, you should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Everyone thinks India buys Russian oil for one simple reason. Because it's cheap. But here's the strange part, guys. The same Russian oil is also one of the reasons Indian rupee keeps weakening. And my primary reason actually today is to make that video. Now, India today runs a trade deficit of roughly $300 billion. That's the total goods trade deficit. And close to 60 billion of that imbalance actually comes from where? Imports from Russia, which is mostly energy. So here's the paradox, the contradiction. If Russian oil weakens India's currency, then why can't India just simply stop buying it? The answer is not that simple because the moment India tried to leave, exit just didn't exist. Exit just disappears. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If you like system-wide geopolitical analysis, make sure to hit like and subscribe because on this channel, we follow the hidden dependencies and shaping the emerging world order. Now, coming back to the story after that whole like and subscribe part is done, all right? See, the story that everyone believes is very simple, that India buys Russian oil because it's cheap, because New Delhi ignores Western sanctions. India is so powerful, all that. But the explanation actually misses what actually happened because India did try to leave. I'm not going to lie to you. The numbers were there. India did try to leave in late 2025 after sanctions hit Rosneft and Lukoil. Those are Russian companies, okay? India's major refiners began walking away from Russian crude. That is Ural. Reliance, HPCL Mittal, MRPL. These are all Indian refineries, okay? And they all started to walk away. Russia's share of India's oil imports dropped below 25% for the first time in 2 years. India even agreed to gradually phase out Russian crude. But just as India started moving away, the whole entire global oil system, the global oil supply chain, it just broke because of what? The Iran war. Tensions escalated in the Gulf. Iran simply blockaded the Strait of Hormuz and several regional refineries were struck. Right? And within the days, the oil market went into shock. It went to up, and there was a time when oil was being sold at 115 or something. So India's crude purchase jumped from $69 per barrel to $85.43 in just 5 days. A 24% actually, almost 24% spike overnight. And suddenly what happened? Every supplier that was supposed to replace Russian crude was either disrupted or politically unavailable. For example, I'll tell you this. See, India normally believes in the shorter supply chain. What happened? Shorter supply chain meaning Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, Oman, Nigeria, all that, right? But the main suppliers like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and all, they were all disrupted. So Indian refiners, what they did, they went back to Russian oil. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And that's when the real structure becomes visible. Like there are four structural locks, structural reasons that keep India tied to Russian crude. It's like a trap. Those are reasons with those locks. So let's talk about those locks today and let's get going. Let's get started. Before I do all that, let me share my actually slide. Okay. So here we go. And let's go to this reason number one. The reason number one is very simple actually. The exit doesn't exist. The way I'm putting it, I mean, it seems like it is very simple, but reality of it is that it can be a serious problem. India actually tried to leave Russian oil, like I said earlier, and then the Gulf disruption, and then just recently, just yesterday, in fact, this morning, it happened in April 2026. That is today. That the U.S. Treasury announced the licenses allowing transactions for Russian and Iranian oil would not be renewed, which meant three supply lanes disappeared simultaneously: Russian lane, Iranian lane, and Gulf lane. Russian lane is closed by because of the sanctions, Iranian lane closed by the policy, and Gulf lane is closed by disrupted by the conflict and all that. So, so the entire replacement supply base collapsed. Even though I think that US is on purpose at this point in the war, they're trying to redirect the supply chain to themselves. But I don't know if that's gonna happen though. So India didn't fail to leave Russian oil. India just left. India went back to what? Russian oil. Exit ramp simply didn't exist. That's the problem, right? Then comes the reason number two. Let me see. There you go. Russia is the only unsanctionable supplier. Now, if you look at all this, if you look at my slide, you will see that there's a deeper structural problem, right? Almost every oil supplier in the world has a Western off switch built into it, the system. That is dollar, right? Saudi Arabia and Iraq depend on the US security guarantees. UAE operates heavily inside US financial networks. The global LNG supply chains rely on Western dominated shipping, insurance, and finance, right? Which means supply can be cut off without firing a single shot. And we have seen this happening over and over and over. So, when the European Union sanctioned Naira Energy, okay, that is a Russian company, Saudi Aramco, Iraq, Somo immediately stopped supplying crude oil to that refinery. That's what they did. They stopped supplying crude oil to that refinery. They forgot that their bricks and all that good stuff, that all the talk of all that, right? All that talk was out of the window. No blockade, no military action, just one policy decision. Now, but with Russia, when India is dealing with Russia, Russia is different. Russia has nuclear deterrence. Russia is a former superpower. Russia is a present military power. So, and then also after 2022 sanctions, Russian economy is pretty much independent of dollar. It works outside the dollar umbrella. And Russia has sovereign Arctic reserves, an alternative shipping corridor outside Western leverage. Like if you look into what's that called corridor? It's Vladivostok Chennai corridor. There is no Western interference over there because most of it is actually Russian border, and then comes the Chinese border, and then comes the Indian Ocean. So this whole thing brings us to what? The long game, the northern sea route. So an Arctic, it's we all know what Northern Sea Route is, right? It's about what 12,800 kilometers long, compared with roughly what 21,000 kilometers through the Suez Canal and all that, right? So so Arctic route is way smaller, shorter than the Suez Canal route in itself. That saves what 10 to 15 days of shipping time. So when India works with Russia, the India is not just thinking in terms of buying the crude oil. It's a very long strategy that India is looking into. Uh, that India has Arctic leverage over there. That India can continue to buy Russian oil and natural gas and all that without having to worry about somebody getting into war or some supply chain getting disrupted and this and that, right? So India is already investing in this whole thing. So during Prime Minister Modi's July 2004 visit to Moscow, India and Russia launched a Northern Sea Route Working Group. Then India has also signed a $750 million agreement with Rosatom to build what? Four Arctic icebreakers. And not to mention, Russia is going to provide the steel for that as well. So all this thing matters for another reason, that India is 100% import dependent on what? Lithium, cobalt, nickel, the critical minerals needed for batteries and energy shortage. And Northern Sea Route is emerging as what? Northern Minerals Corridor, linking what? Those reserves directly to India's industrial base. And all that can be found in the Arctic. Okay. So so Russia is becoming a part of India's long-term energy geography. So it's not just something that that India is going to quit buying things from Russia just because of there is a trade deficit or something. India is going to manage that trade deficit and that rupee problem by exporting to other countries wherever. And then when you work more and more with the country, then eventually what happens is that you balance that trade, right? Then comes the reason number three. The reason number three is that infrastructure is already set, right? What do you mean by that? It simply means that India is not just buying the Russian oil. India Russian infrastructure is already embedded India inside the India's energy system. What does that mean? See, the clearest, I would say, the most uh, clear example will be the Vadinor refinery in Gujarat, operated by Naira Energy. Its capacity is what 400,000 barrels per day, right? That makes it what India's second largest refinery, representing what 8% of national refining capacity. Ownership, Rosneft holds 49.13%. So the total Russian investment across the refinery, port, and retail network is roughly what $23 billion. So when European Union sanctions hit Naira in July 2025, Saudi Aramco and Iraq Somo immediately stopped selling crude to that refinery, which meant Naira had no alternative supplier. And now that refinery runs almost entirely on what? Russian Ural crude. And what happens? See, when sanctions hit, what happens? Even the maintenance contracts became difficult because European contracts refused to work with the sanctioned company. And this continues to expand. Now, if you look into this, the problem, like for example, India stopped buying oil from India used to buy oil from Iran till 2018 until President Donald Trump actually asked India to stop buying. And as a result, what happened that you realize that India basically start buying Iranian oil just to oblige Americans that okay, all right, man, we are strategic partners, so okay, we will oblige this time because Trump is my friend. But turns out the friend is just trying to backstab. So we may actually end up seeing that India will eventually start buying Iranian oil too. Maybe they have already started to do that. So let's see how that's going to pan out. But I think that India will start buying it. And so, and then, but India is still now ramping up buying the Russian crude. Like, for example, HPC's Barmer refinery, it adds 180,000 barrels per day. Then Indian oil, Panipat expands what? 200,000 barrels per day. So India's total capacity will reach what? 5.4 million barrels per day. So that's how it's gonna pan out. Okay. Now let's get into the fourth reason: the economics punish exit. So let me get to that. All right, one sec. And here's the reason number four. What is the economics here? What does that mean? This is the final reason. Okay, final reason is the economics. Discounted Russian crude oil saved India more than $13 billion between 2023 and 2024 alone. But the system works in an even more interesting way. India buys discounted crude oil, refines it into diesel and aviation fuel, and exports those fuels globally, often to Europe, the same country that is sanctioning Russia, which means Indian refineries are effectively buying cheap Russian crude. We all know that, right? Refining it, selling the fuel back to what countries enforcing the sanctions. So, if India leaves that system, that would increase India's oil import bill by roughly what? 9 to $11 billion per year. And I have done actually a price analysis, cost analysis on this whole thing as to why India will never stop buying Russian oil as far as money is concerned. And I'll post the link to that video in the description so you can go check it out. Okay. So, and this cost, because if you start to look into the pricing of it, what you find is that uh, how pricing works. I mean, I will have to explain it. This is gonna be very. If it will become very long video actually. If I will get into the pricing of it and all that, if I start to explain the pricing, let me try to actually explain a little bit. See, when you look into the refinery, okay, when you uh, try to work with in the refinery, when you try to refine the crude, so each and every product that the refined crude products, each and every refined crude product has its own pricing, meaning that per barrel price for example diesel is $18 per barrel, then gasoline will be probably uh 10 to $12 per barrel. Okay, so all in all, whatever products you get out of that refinery, let's say you bought the crude for $69 per barrel, so each and everything that you get, so let's say yield of diesel was 35%, then gasoline was 50%, like that. I mean, I'm just giving away a rough, okay, idea. So what happens with that is that you have to multiply all that, right? And so all in all, what happens is that India actually ends up selling that uh, up at 80 to $85 per barrel, each and overall. Okay, so India makes almost 10 to $15 per barrel of profit from it. Okay, Indian companies, let's say. And this is why, as far as the pricing is concerned and the money wise, economics wise, India just doesn't want to leave it. Why? See, India may leave. Some people will say that, yeah, India should leave and this and that. But the reality is this, that if India leaves, then somebody else will fill that gap. Make no mistake. In fact, chances are the same Americans who are asking India to leave it, they may actually end up buying it, the same oil too. Okay, so they may actually end up buying the same oil from Russia. You never know. With Americans, you never know the kind of game they play. Okay, so right now, like they're creating the blockade in what? In the Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. basically out of it, actually, the Sea of Aden and around that. So, sorry, Sea of Azov it is. I can't remember. But what's happening with the blockade is that they're trying to block everything so that the supply chain eventually goes westwards. And I have explained all these things into my videos in the videos like petrodollar is dying and this and that, all that titles. Okay, probably I will try to make the clip and post it here on the channel. So you may check it out. But all in all, what I'm saying is that Americans are trying to move that supply chain to westward so that at least US and Canada, they both have benefited from it, and Venezuela too. And then later on, Canada and US may cut a deal that, hey, I'm giving you the business, so give us this or something. You never know. Okay. But at the end of it all, that's the whole idea they're trying to do. So for India, the losing that strategic autonomy, or India's strategic autonomy, is of utmost importance. So India doesn't want to lose that autonomy over its decision making and everything else. So that's why no matter what happens, okay, India is not going to get into the situation where they will lose that autonomy. Okay, so India is going to continue to buy Russian oil. And as far as trade imbalance is concerned, I think that Russians are very well aware of it and they're working on it. So I think that trade imbalance will be sorted out in next 5 years or so. Okay. And Chinese are, I don't know if Chinese are going to do that or not, but Chinese are very tricky. Okay. The way they play this game hot and cold, you just cannot trust them. Okay. But as far as Russians are concerned, I think they're going to. So, yeah, until then, it is a trap. India is trapped in this loop because if India leaves that Russian oil, then somebody else will fill that gap, fill that void, and India will end up probably buying it from America, Venezuela, this and that. And that we all know how that ends up eventually, right? So, there is that. All right. So this is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. Please do like and subscribe. And yes, if you have any questions or concerns about it, please do post it in the comments. And please do go check out my book that just published. Okay. I'm going to post a link to my book as well in the description. Thank you.